Usually when I'm filming a book and a brew, I've got something exciting to drink, like a coffee. Sometimes I've had a Baileys or a cocktail. Today it's Lemsip. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and today I am taking you through another book and a brew. This is where I sit down with a drink and take you through 3 of my most recent reads, or 3 reads that have anything in common with each other. It can be a very tenuous link, like they have the same colour, or it can be something a little bit stronger, like today's one, where all of these books would be super readable around Halloween. It's coming into that spooky time of the year. Halloween is just around the corner, so if you're looking for something that's going to bring in a little bit of a heightened atmosphere, all 3 of these books are perfect. Starting off with the Ex Hex by Erin Sterling. This is the first book by Erin Sterling, but this is a pseudonym of the author Rachel Hawkins, who you may already know as the author of The Nowhere Girls, or as the author of the Royals series of YA books. And those are 2 of the books that I have already read from her. I've already read the 2 books in the Royals series, so Royals and Her Royal Highness, or Her Prince Charming, or something like that. So I already knew what her writing style was going to be like. I already knew that there were parts of it that I gelled with really well. There were some parts of it that I didn't gel with really well. But when they are writing under a different name, when they're writing a different genre, when they're writing a very different type of book, there's always going to be something new. There's always going to be something new that you can experience. And I was very excited to see how I would get on with this one. In the Ex Hex, you are following Vivian, or Vivi to her friends, who is a witch in a small town in Georgia. She is part of a coven with her cousin and her aunt, and her mother, I think, as well as part of this coven. 9 years before the start of the book, Vivi was in a very short-term relationship with a man named Rhys, who came over from Wales. He was also part of a magical family, and he was in the area to try and rebuild the magic that his family has, strengthen it, and then go back home. It turns out that Rhys is already betrothed to somebody. He has got somebody in line for when he goes back to Wales, and this breaks Vivi's heart completely. She really thought that this guy was the one. They had such a great rapport. They had really great chemistry, and she is completely devastated when he goes back to Wales. So she decides to hex him. She has a candle from like Bed Bath & Beyond or Bath & Body Works, or one of those stores in the US that does like Target kind of stuff or Walmart kind of stuff, like home decor and baking utensils and candles and all that kind of thing. So she's got a candle from there and she's going to use it to hex Rhys. Basically, she's going to make his life hell. She makes it so that any kind of romantic or sexual encounter that he has is going to fall completely flat, that he can never get his hair to sit right, that his sock is always going to fall down in his shoe. Basically, any kind of a minor inconvenience that she can put upon him has been done. She thinks that because this is like a $5 candle, it's not going to do anything. I mean, it smells of like apples and cinnamon, so there's not going to be anything that happens. But it turns out that this hex is a lot more powerful than she had ever expected. Rhys comes back into town because, again, the power lines of the family have kind of waned and Rhys needs to go and recharge them. So he comes back to this tiny town and again runs into Vivi and her family. It turns out that his life has not been going well at all. He hasn't been able to get a girlfriend ever since he and Vivi split up. The engagement that he was supposed to be in completely fell to trash because of what happened. And now Vivi is left with the idea that, oh shit, maybe I've got more powers than I was expecting to have. While the 2 of them are back together, they accidentally set a ghost upon the town, and so have to kind of band together to rid the town of this bad energy, I would say, to put the ghost back to rest and just basically restore order to everybody's lives. There are some really great side characters in this. I absolutely adored Vivi's cousin Gwen. I thought she was such a great friend to her cousin. I thought she was such a great side character anyway. We get to discover quite a lot of her backstory. And I'm really glad that we're actually going to find out more about Gwen in The Kiss Curse, which is the 2nd book in the series and has just recently been released. So if you have read the Ex Hex, if you like the sound of the Ex Hex from this and you start picking it up, don't worry, there is definitely more for you. I like a spicy romance. We know that. If you've been in this channel for more than 5 minutes, you'll know that spicy romances are kind of my bread and butter. And this wasn't a very spicy romance. There is maybe one or two spicy scenes, and I wouldn't even say that they are particularly heavy on the spice. But I don't think that this book would have lent itself to a heavy spice situation. It feels very kind of cozy, small town, Halloweeny vibes. It's kind of got the same vibe as Sabrina the Teenage Witch, in that you've got witches in the town, but their magic is not known to anyone else. Or it's got the same kind of a vibe as Hocus Pocus, because there's kind of a really bad energy in the town that they've accidentally set out and that they need to correct what they've done. Or it's kind of got like Gilmore Girls vibes, because it's a very tight-knit female friendship relationship, familial relationship in a very rural community in the US, and I absolutely loved all three of those. So I knew that when I went into this book, this was going to be something that I would absolutely adore, and I was completely correct. I love a kind of a small town setting, so this absolutely ticked the boxes. Something that I will say initially worried me is how they were going to treat Reese. I studied in Wales. I lived in Wales for a year and a half. I have a lot of friends who are Welsh. I have a lot of respect for Welsh people as a whole. So I was a little bit worried to find out that Reese was Welsh. I will say that some of the names in his family were a little bit kind of stereotypically Welsh. Reese's name was obviously Welsh. He has a brother named Llewellyn, who is also a Welsh name. And there were a couple of others in his family that I just thought maybe this is a little bit too on the nose. And this was very early on when you initially met Reese and his family. So I was a little bit kind of worried or concerned that they would be made a kind of a caricature of what Welsh people are actually like, but I had absolutely nothing to worry about. There was never a mention of a sheep. It was really well written. It was so clear that Erin had done so much research into what Welsh people are actually like, that she didn't want to go down any kind of stereotypical roads of making them obsessed with rugby or making them kind of the stereotypical thing that you would think of when you think of a Welsh person. I was really glad with how it was portrayed, and I have a lot of respect for her as an author now. Something else I was a little bit concerned about as an Irish speaker is how the word Samhain was going to be dealt with. Obviously, Samhain is quite a big thing in Irish culture. It is the basis of Halloween as a whole. So when I knew that the word Samhain was going to come up once or twice, I initially read it as part of the ebook that I was reading, so I didn't have to grapple with it in any way. But I listened to the last maybe 10 or 15 chapters when I was in work one day, and I knew that Samhain was going to come up. It was kind of hinting that Samhain was kind of coming down the line soon enough as a word and as a concept. So I was a little bit concerned. I did think, what if they just call it Samhain? They can't call it Samhain in the year of our Lord 2022. They have got to figure out how to pronounce Samhain. Luckily, the audiobook narrator, Caitlin Davis, knocked it out of the park. She pronounced it so perfectly the two times that I had listened to it that now Caitlin Davis has become one of my favourite audiobook narrators after just one book. That is such a high level of praise, and it has definitely made me want to look out for other books that she's narrated in the future. Another thing that really endeared me to this book, and also that kind of made it feel a little bit like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, was Sir Percival. Sir Percival is the cat that Vivian and her family have, and throughout the book you learn that this cat has a couple of magical tendencies himself. He is able to talk. He's not able to hold like proper conversations like Salem Sagerhagen is able to. He's not able to like sit down and tell you about how his day has gone. He's just able to, like any other cat in the world, look up at you and demand that you give him treats. I absolutely adored this. I would lay my life on the line for that cat. And if he manages to turn up in the Kiss Curse again, I'm not going to say no. Overall, I really, really enjoyed this book. It is like the perfect kind of small town, cozy vibes romance that if you're looking for something like that this Halloween, if you're not too into like the spooky books, if you just want something that's going to be a little bit of a cozy vibe, but still has that Halloween-y feeling to it, this is the one to pick up. Next up is a book that I took in wholly as an audiobook, and I am so glad that I did. It is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaithe. I did have a physical copy of this, but I actually gave it to a friend of mine as a gift last year because I knew that this was kind of the book that she would enjoy. And I haven't actually checked if she's read it or not yet, but I loved this one. This book is set in Nigeria and it follows two sisters, Koreda and Aoife. Koreda is working as a nurse and Aoife is her younger sister, and Aoife has always had the attention from guys, from their mother, from their father, from any member of society that they've met. Koreda is always the kind of one that's like a wallflower, fades a little bit into the background, is not as instantly noticeable, whereas her sister is described as strikingly beautiful and you cannot get her off your mind the minute that you've seen her. There is, however, a flaw with Aoife. She has murdered 3 of her past partners. Koreda is now almost expecting to get a phone call from Aoife that she has done away with another one of her partners after a disagreement or after an argument or just basically because she's gotten bored of them. So one evening, Koreda gets a phone call from her sister that it's happened again, and now they need to try and hide the body, hide the evidence, because this guy is very well known in the town that they grew up in. So there's going to be a lot more notoriety about this one, and it turns out there is much more notoriety than any other of the guys that Aoife has done away with. There is a missing persons case, there are cops that turn up at their doorstep now and then, and because Aoife was in a relationship with this guy, she is not instantly a suspect, but she is one of the persons of interest in this case, you would say. So the cops kind of turn up now and then and just ask her a lot of questions and kind of dig into where she was on the night, why she would have been there, how much of an involvement she would have had, if any at all. I don't think there's a lot of us out there who have that kind of a relationship with our siblings that we would willingly lie to the cops or hide evidence or hide a body for them. One day, while Aoife is visiting Koreda at the hospital where Koreda works, Aoife bumps into a man named Tede. Koreda has had a crush on Tede for a really long time, but she has never done anything about it. She's never felt comfortable enough to tell him how she feels about him. But as soon as Aoife and Tede lay eyes on each other, it is instant attraction. And then the clock starts ticking in Koreda's mind. She is just seeing what the eventual outcome is going to be, that he's going to have a knife in his heart, or that he's going to have one of his legs cut off from the rest of his body, or something horrific is going to happen to him, and she has to do everything in her power to make sure that this does not happen, that history doesn't repeat itself all over again. And it was a really interestingly written book. As I said, I listened to it as an audiobook, and I really loved that I had done that because the narrator of this audiobook was so engaging and really kept the suspense going and the thrills going, and you never knew where it was going to bring you. You never knew what kind of a road you were going to go down next, and I really loved that about this. One thing that I did not enjoy is that the timeline jumps can be a little bit all over the place, I would say. It would kind of just drag you back into another timeline, and then you're brought straight back into the present day, and then you go right back again. And that did feel a little bit jarring and juttering at times, that I never felt like I knew what was happening at the time. That might have been something that was easier laid out in the physical book or in the Kindle copy, but when I was listening to it as an audiobook, it did just get a little bit confusing now and then to think, where in the timeline am I? Who is this person? What relevance does this have to the main narrative of the story? Something that I did love though was the chapters itself. The chapters in this book are quite small, they're quite short, they're quite snappy, and it's a very easy read to say, I'm just going to read another 5 chapters and then I will fix this. Or I'll just read another 5 chapters and then I will start dinner. Or I'll read another 5 chapters and then I'll go to bed. It's really quick, it's really engaging, and the chapters draw you in without being too verbose. I also really loved some of the words at the start of the chapter that explain what's happening to it or have some kind of a connection to what's happening in the chapter that you're about to read. I loved listening to it at the start and trying to think, what is going to be the reference here that I'm supposed to be getting, or what's going to be the relevance to the chapter in this word. It was really engaging. It was such an entertaining book, and I absolutely recommend this one. The final book for today is Lying in Wait by Liz Nugent. First of all, I have to give a shout out to Aoife from Words of Clover, who told me to read this as part of my 15 before 30 last year, and then I completely forgot that this book existed until this year. I have eventually corrected my ways, do not worry, and I'm kind of kicking myself for waiting so long to read this. I think this is Liz's second book, And you can really see how much her writing is starting to come along. It is really well written. It is completely gripping, and it really will hook you in right from the start. I've read out the first line of this book so many times that I think it's burned into my brain. But the first line goes, "My husband didn't mean to kill Annie Doyle, but the lying tramp deserved it." And then you go on and you realise, why did Annie Doyle die, and what is the relevance that she has to this family, and how much of a kind of a snowball effect her death has had on so many people. This book is a kind of a multi-narrative book. It doesn't just feature the points of view of Andrew and Lydia, but it also features the points of view of Karen, who is Annie Doyle's sister, and Lawrence, who is Andrew and Lydia's son. At the time of the murder, Lawrence is about 18 years old, and he's going through all of the things that a young boy would go through. He's going through his first love, the first time he's ever had sex. He is going through relationships. He's also going through quite a lot of body image issues. Lawrence is quite obese and has never really felt comfortable in his body. Throughout the book, you do see him kind of grapple with his weight and make a lot of really big efforts to change his life and to take a little bit more of control of his body, of his weight, of his eating desires. And it really is written well here. I will say though that Lawrence wasn't one of my favorite characters to read. I kind of felt he was a little bit hard to read at times. There were a lot of parts of him that were very difficult to read because of how intertwined with this case he actually was, how much he eventually found out or had known from the start or had never found out at all. Kind of seeing that subterfuge of people that he had gotten throughout the book, it was a little bit difficult for me to read at times, especially some of the actions that he had gone through. But he was still a really good character to read. I think of all of the characters to read, my favourite is probably Karen, who is Annie Doyle's sister. You see just how much a murder can have an impact on the families that are left behind. You can see just how much their lives have been turned upside down. Not just Karen, but also their father, their mother. That has left an entire chasm in their lives that they never really feel like they can move on from it. And I really enjoyed reading that whole kind of family drama aspect to it. But I don't think she was the best written character. The best written character in this book, by far, is Lydia Fitzsimons. She is completely unhinged. She is completely dependent on so many people and has never really atoned for any of the things that have happened to her in her life. That you just read this book and every 5 pages or so, something new comes out and something new is developed and something new starts, or you find out something from the past and it just blows your mind completely. One of Liz Nugent's absolute best talents is leading you down a path and making you think this is where the book is going to go and this is what's going to happen and here's how it's going to end. And then you get to this fork in the road and she completely spins you around and drags you down a path that you didn't even see at the side of the road. Liz Nugent's endings are phenomenal and you never expect what's going to happen in them. You never expect how it's going to play out, and there were so many things about this ending that I think if I read back over this book, I still wouldn't be able to pick up anything that had happened in it. I still wouldn't be able to say, oh, that's definitely a sign of what's going to come. I would love to know how Liz Nugent's mind works. I know that there's a couple of other books of hers that I have yet to read. I haven't yet read Unraveling Oliver, but if it's anything like this and the other 2 Liz Nugent books that I have picked up, I just know that I'm in for such a good time. Something else that I also really enjoyed about this book is obviously that it's set in Ireland. I loved that I knew the streets that Lawrence was walking down with his family. I loved that I've been to Athlone a couple of times, so when there was a scene set in Athlone, I knew, oh, they're near to this place, or this is where they're going for dinner, or things like that. I know all of the places in Ireland that they've been to in this book, but also it did give me a little bit of wanderlust in a way. Lawrence and one of his partners take a trip to Rome in this book, and you can just see the elegance of Rome. You can smell the pasta when you're reading this book. You can hear like people standing outside of a restaurant trying to draw you in with specials or with temptations. And it's so phenomenally written that it really does transport you into Rome. Like I've said, anything that Liz has written has turned to gold for me. So I just know that anything that is in the future, is going to spellbind me. Those are 3 books that I think would be perfect for Halloween reading this year. Have you got anything Halloweeny on your shelf already, or what are you planning to read for Halloween weekend? If you can think of anything that you would like to say, then just leave me the black heart emoji. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.